Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp, and welcome to part 2 of my series on my working to attain knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, which I engaged in 2013. In this video I'll be talking about finishing the working and what the experience of knowledge and conversation which I achieved really felt like. As I said in my previous video, I set aside 6 months to do my working to contact my Holy Guardian Angel, and I chose Liber Samek as the ritual that I was using to do that, and I repeated that ritual a total of 262 times over that 6-month period. On the 6-month mark, the 262nd time that I did this, I had a experience which wasn't that much different from any of the other days, where I had done Samek. I had a vision during the meditation of a monk-like figure with golden peacock feathers behind him, but other than that, nothing special. It wasn't like suddenly there was a pillar of light that appeared and everything just made sense. There were still a few more days where I had to go through some very intense transformations before the full manifestation of the angel was realized. I finished the component of the working where I had to do all of the ritual work, and now I would spend the next 3 days waiting for the angel to show itself, and I didn't really know what to expect. But as it happened, at the beginning of this 3-day period was timed so that the first 2 days, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and I would be going away to York. We did that. We got in the car and we were driving to the accommodation where we would be staying with some of our friends, and my girlfriend pulled out an album that she'd recently bought. It was Sempiternal by Bring Me the Horizon. She pulled out the CD, because this was back in the day when we still had CD players in the car, and CDs with album art on them. And I looked at the cover of the CD, and I looked at the design on the CD itself, and lo and behold, it was the flower of life. So you remember from my last video, this was the angel's calling card all throughout the Samek working. So this to me seemed like an indication that something tremendous was about to occur. So we put the album in the CD player and began to listen. And the first track that came on was Can You Feel My Heart? And the lyrics and the musical composition of that particular track really captured the feeling of the Holy Guardian Angel as I had experienced it up until that point. So it seemed very serendipitous indeed. And this song would later become a trigger, if you will, for an even more profound spiritual experience. So the seeds were being sowed in my unconscious for something to occur. So we got to York, and later that night, a few of us went around the town just to check it out. It's a remote regional town in Western Australia. And we were exploring, and at one point we came across this rope bridge. And if you've been in remote Australia, you know it's really deserted out there, and there's just vast expanses of nothingness, particularly at night time, where the few residents of the area have gone to sleep, and all the lights are off. So we crossed this rope bridge, and I kind of fell behind from the rest of the group, and I stood alone in the center of this rope bridge, and I was suspended over a river, and in front of me there was this vast expanse of nothingness, and the sky was overcast, so there were no stars in the sky. It was pure blackness, and in the river below me, that blackness was reflected even more. So as I gazed out at this vista, I was surrounded by just darkness that seemed to go on forever. And in that split second, I took in this experience, and it pushed some sort of button in me, and it started a process that my consciousness was going through, which I didn't quite understand at the time. But I touched something by touching that blackness. And then the experience ended, and we went back to just doing what we were doing. And then when we came back from the trip the next day, I remember feeling something was off. The only word that I can use to describe it is I felt really nihilistic. I felt like nothing mattered. And it was because of that experience on the rope bridge. I felt as though I'd been shown the abyss that everything is going to return to. And it really highlighted the pointlessness of human existence and all of the things that our ego thinks is important, that our ego clings to for a sense of identity, for a sense of continuity. And it was really unsettling me. And to compound this fact, I was thinking about how I was expecting the angel to appear. I mean, shouldn't that be a beautiful experience full of light and love and joy and all of that? Instead, I'd been confronted with the void, and just trying to process that. And I felt this deep existential despair, and I had to sit with this feeling. And this lasted for another day. The next day, I was still feeling this way. So I prayed to the angel to try and understand what this experience meant, why I was going through this, feeling this way. And at a certain point, as I was deep in prayer, I suddenly was able to flip the experience. I suddenly had the realization that far from this encounter with the void and the inevitability of returning to that void being something to despair over, it was actually liberating. Because what that void truly represented, and this is something that the Buddhists in particular understood very well, was infinite being. It represented the infinite, the formless, the ultimate form of existence, the ultimate reality. And the fact that that is what we're all returning to was a cause for celebration, not for despair. And those moments in the Samek working where I had touched that void within myself were the most blissful and joyful moments that I had experienced in that period. Stripping away everything else and just leaving boundless being was something that brought an incredible bliss, a perfect bliss that couldn't be tainted by something worldly being taken away. It simply was because it was, and its existence was blissful just for its own sake, not for any reason in particular. And I suddenly came to the realization that we were all returning to that, and that when all of the stuff of the world ceases, as indeed it must, that incredible boundlessness is all that remains. And that's what we truly are inside. And when I had that, I went into the most incredible state of spiritual ecstasy. I had Sempiternal with me. I put it on as I was processing all of this. And when I heard, "Can you feel my heart again?" that is what brought on the ecstasy. It was like an uncontrollable outpouring of joy and elation. I can't really begin to explain it. And a feeling of just being completely one with the cosmos. So this incredible experience, and I knew then that what I was experiencing was knowledge and conversation. I was experiencing life as Atman. And so what did I do for the rest of the day? I had the day off, like many of my days in 2013. So I went to the park and I just wandered around for a few hours and I just enjoyed being. I just enjoyed existing, and I was completely happy. I was completely content, the way that a child is content. Nothing bothered me. I was just happy to exist, happy in the knowledge of what my being truly was. It was beautiful. And then as time went on, I began to come back down to earth, but it was incredible while it lasted. And that's the story of how I attained knowledge and conversation. That's not the end of the story. At the time in my spiritual journey when I did the work, I still didn't have enough understanding to really appreciate the full implications of the experience that I just had. It would take me several more years to develop that appreciation as I reflected on the experience that I went through in 2013. But it really shifted my perspective. And I used to worry a lot before that. Before that experience, I used to get really worked up about the state of the world. I'd get into deep states of despair about the world that I was living in, how flawed it was, and the fact that I was trapped in that. And how could I live in this world where there's so much suffering? But then, after knowledge and conversation, it was like I was protected from that. It's like there was a buffer from that. It's like suddenly all of that didn't have as much importance to me. Suddenly I understood whatever awful situations we went through in this worldly life of ours, there's something which endures beyond that. It is our experience as pure divinity, and we can access that at any time. It won't be diminished by anything that happens to us in this world, and it will always be there if we look for it. And that was an incredibly liberating and relieving thing to learn. It has changed my perspective. And from that core understanding, I've developed out an entire worldview as I've come to understand the meaning of knowledge and conversation, as I've done the work that one must do post knowledge and conversation. And those are topics that I'll talk about later down the track in subsequent videos. But the important thing, the big story here, is what an experience of knowledge and conversation is really like, what it's like to carry out a working to achieve that. And there's not a lot of information out there which will tell you that. So that's why I wanted to make this video, because I think it's something people deserve to know. So I hope that you have enjoyed that and my previous video on this topic. If you did, press that like button, press that subscribe button to support my work. Thanks again as usual for listening. I'll see you next time.